Hi everyone, welcome to this edition of Hiring Diaries. Today our guest is Ernest Paskey, Head of AonAssessment Solutions for North America and Asia. Welcome to the show, Ernie.
Oh, thanks, Sid. It's so great to be talking with you. I always enjoy our conversations. I'm looking forward to this.
Likewise. So just to set a bit of context, just before we jump into the questions, organizational psychology, which might be something that a lot of people haven't really come across in day-to-day language, it's a vast area of research which has helped companies of all sizes for decades. One of the key creations of this field has been personality assessments. Since personality assessments came about, there have been all sorts of assessments being offered by hundreds of companies. Today, our topic of discussion with Ernie is assessments and how to best use them as a business. So, Ernie, why don't we begin with a quick background of your role at Aon, and then we can jump into more around the topic.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the introduction. At the heart of what we do at Aon and what my passion has been throughout my career is really helping organizations make good decisions around their talent. And I love to just at this time pause and reflect and just um, mention what we're all experiencing, which is this hyper focus on our people in our companies and making sure that we bring in the right talent, that we develop the right talent, that we have the right workforce with the right skills. And that sounds very basic, Sud, right? And of course we do that. But it wasn't that long ago when I used to talk about how companies would spend more time on their IT systems than on their people. And what we've realized in the past few years is our people are at the center of what we do and are at the center of our organizational performance.
So, what are some of the top areas of research in organizational psychology if we were to just educate the viewers a little bit before jumping into assessments?
Yeah, it's really, dynamic and has evolved. So if you asked this question just a few decades ago, I would say that it was very different. Probably less diversity, more homogeneous in purpose about maybe the science of assessment. But the beauty of industrial organizational psychology is its diversity. So you can spend your career focusing on things like employee engagement and culture or performance management, MySpace, hiring, using assessments for hiring, for development, for promotion, things like that. DE&I, diversity, has always been paramount in the field, but today, in today's climate and business objectives, it's super important along with ESG. So it's very broad range. At the heart of it, though, is singular in purpose, which is can we bring the science and a structured methodology to gathering insights about people, teams, and organizations to enhance business performance.
Fantastic. That's a great overview. And you mentioned some of the use cases in there, which are in DEIB and ESG, of course, which are very popular topics right now. Um, Tell us more about how assessments are being used in the area of diversity, for instance.
Yeah, so if we think about where we are today and um, kind of, we're not really at where we want to be in terms of having a diverse workforce. We're not always there. We've definitely gotten a lot better. And why is that? Well, a lot of the systems and a lot of the processes, HR processes for our hiring, our recruiting, for promotion, for succession planning, for identifying high potential, have been designed by predominantly a single group of people. And, it's predominantly white males in organizations that have designed these systems and these processes. Nothing wrong with that. That was the dominant group in the workforce a while back. But in the design of this process, we've had unintended consequences. Maybe the language that we use, maybe the way that we identify talent and say this is a valuable employee has inherent bias. Not intended, but it has bias, and it has disadvantaged certain groups. So now we're really in an interesting stage where we want to look at our processes, want to make sure that we have um, fairness in how we evaluate talent, that the design and the decisions that we make don't have bias in it. So our value proposition, and going back to diversity, is can we identify cleanly and objectively and in a fair way, unbiased way, the the core capabilities, skills, and work styles that are relevant for job performance?
How is an assessment designed, if you could educate us on that?
Yeah, and that's where we get into the science and the methodology. So we've had the advantage of been doing this for years and years and years, and there is the community of IO psychology that has been able to establish this kind of scientific method. But also, we've been guided by professional standards that we adhere to, and we abide by legal requirements too. So, in situations where maybe organizations have not engaged in practices that have benefited society and people and the organization itself, there have been legal cases that have set precedent along the way that have kind of pushed us and say, okay, you need to engage in proper behavior. So the first step, really, to answer your question, Sud, is what is it that we're asking for? So if we go back to the fundamental objective of what we're trying to do, I mentioned that internship, that apprenticeship, and that would be great. But what if you don't have that connection and you've got jobs open and they're all over the world and your applicants are coming from all over the world and there's a lot of people interested? Maybe for every job open, you've got 50 people applying. Well, you can't observe them, each and every one of them. It's a scalability issue. So the question we're trying to answer is, what do we know about this person, or what can we find out about this person that is relevant for the work to be done in our organization? So the first step is, what is the work to be done? What are the requirements to do that work? Do they need to have good decision making skills? Do they need to be flexible and resilient and collaborative? Do they need to have the functional, the technical skills? Maybe it's coding skills, or maybe it's project management skills. So defining the what of the job is first, and then it's answering the question of, does this person have those capabilities, and how do we find out and get those insights into the capabilities, the talent of the individual, in a way that, this is the heart of what Impress AI and you do, is in a way that's engaging, that feels relevant, that's scientifically rigorous, and then being able to make decisions. I've got this group of 50 people. I need to invest. I need to make kind of a bet that this person will be able to come into my organization, hit the ground running, and give us a huge return on investment. And that's where assessment insights give the advantage to organizations on making that correct choice, making sure that their bet does pay off.
Do you think the design of assessments has changed or evolved in any way, as there's a power balance shift happening right now between employers and candidates, right? Has the design of assessments been influenced by how that power balance has shifted quite a bit to the to the candidate side?
It really has, hasn't it? And it's great because I think that very grateful for companies like yours that has been able to respond to that shift accordingly. So it's absolutely what you say. I think about, I'm in my 50s. When I was an early career, it was what you said. Hey, the organization saying, "Hey, I have one job. You tell me, applicant, do you have what it takes to do this job? Give us all the information we're asking for. We'll let you know." Well, and I credit the millennials generation for this. They said, "Oh no, I have choices here. And it's not just about me sharing my capabilities. It's about you, organization, telling me how I fit in. What are your cultural values? What's your mission? Um, what's your value proposition?" And it became a two-way exchange. The other thing that they pushed us on, the millennials pushed us on, and said, "Okay, I'll apply for this one job, one person, one job, but that's not enough. I want to know what other jobs might I be a good match for? And if I do take this one job, what are the other jobs that I may grow into? What's my development journey?" So I really credit this generation that came in a few years ago for pushing the this dynamic, this two-way dynamic between the individual and the organization. And it continues to be that way. Now we're seeing that the next generation coming in is about data privacy. And okay, I have data on my capabilities. I am in control of that data, and I will choose how much of that to share with you, and how much that I'll provide. So it's really creating this hyper dynamic, fluid situation. How we respond, again, I would look at Empress AI. I would look at we're still measuring the same thing. So it's not like decision making has changed to something else. We still need to have quality decision making. It may look a little different in that you need to use data more and more to make decisions, but it's still at the core of decision making. How we assess that? Well, days are gone when we ask them to fill out, answer 20, 30, 40 questions that are just question one, A, B, C, D, and here's your choices. It has to feel relevant. Ideally, it has to be engaging, has to draw the person in, especially in this labor dynamic, because we want them to continue in the process, and we don't want our candidates saying, you know what, I'm not really enjoying this. I'm not going to apply for this job.
Now, in terms of the use of assessments, what do you think are the most common misconceptions that you come across when you talk to companies?
Yeah, at the core, this is fascinating, right? Because everybody knows how to evaluate talent. I mean, we've all done it, whether we've been in the employment setting and we've interviewed candidates, or we've coached maybe a youth sports team and we've looked at a player and said, this is what I think they can and can't do. So anytime you have something that you're bringing science and you're bringing an objective kind of outside view into a decision making process that we as people do on a regular basis, there needs to be this kind of collaborative joining of both the science of objective assessment and the core decision making we make as individuals. So I'll hear every so often, and less these days, but I know how to evaluate talent. And the answer to that is yes, you absolutely do. And most people know how. I know how to identify a high performer or a top candidate. And the answer is yes, you do. The next question is, but do you do it each and every time? And the answer we know from just data, tons and tons of data, is no. We have biases. We have, the decision, our ability to make a quality decision today. Tomorrow, maybe we don't make such a good decision. So there's volatility. So can you make a great hire based on your personal judgment? Yes, you can. You can also equal chance you're going to make a bad hire. And we hate to admit it, but I think we've all experienced making a bad decision on bringing a person on board and having the consequences of that. It can be very costly, it can be very painful, it can impact team morale. So assessments is not there to replace human decision making, but it's rather to increase the frequency of a quality decision. So if we as humans, without any objective assessments, make a good decision, a bad decision, a good decision, we've got volatility, we've got risk. If we can smooth that out where we're making good, great hiring decisions, promotion decisions each and every time by bringing in objective insights onto our people, our workforce, then we reduce risk, we reduce cost. It's like anything else in business operations. It's just, in this case, we're dealing with people and talent. The other one that's very relevant today, Sud, is, and I touched on it earlier, is, if we use assessments, candidates won't apply. And that's a very much a conventional wisdom that we hear, and it's about frictionless hiring. We just want people to apply easily and quickly, but what we know from the data is no, it actually doesn't work out that way. Organizations that have used assessments and then have dropped the use of assessments with the objective of getting more candidate flow, getting more applicants because they just need more people, quickly revert back to using assessments because the quality of the talent coming in drops significantly, and turnover, for example, will spike, or job performance will drop because there's just no evaluation of the quality of talent. The other data point is when we've looked at using assessments versus not using assessments. It doesn't slow time to hire. It's about the same amount of time. And the notion that people will look and say, oh, this company is requiring me to take a 20-minute assessment, I'm not going to apply. The data shows that that's actually a good thing, because the people that say, I'm not going to apply because I'm not going to take 20 minutes to show my capabilities, are probably not the people the organization wants. The top talent, people that are high performers, they want that opportunity to show their capabilities and show the stuff that they have. They welcome that and they want that.
Last time we met, Ernie, you mentioned about this idea of the hidden worker, which really intrigued me, and I looked up the paper as well. Um, would you talk about that concept a little bit? Like, how can companies discover this new pool of talent that might be hidden and might actually be future leaders?
Yeah, there's two things that I think are interesting about the hidden worker. One is it's the hidden worker is really about who are these this talent, this pockets of talent that we just don't see. They just don't even show up in the employment radar. And why is that? And oftentimes, when we find out, it's because they have exited the workforce at some point, and there's barriers to re-entering the workforce. Those barriers may be a little bit of fear-based, or I just don't know if I have the skill set, and I'm not real clear when I look at what the organization is asking for. Do I have those skills? So demystifying a person's capabilities. And again, that's where assessments can come in. Let it, if you take an assessment, and you've got some self awareness around your capabilities, and if there is a gap to readiness for employment. The other is, I would say to any organization, look very closely at your processes. So it's fascinating to me to read things from comments hidden workers will say, the organization is asking for 5 years of experience. I have 4. I don't have enough, so I'm not going to apply. Well, I would say to the organization, is it really 5 years that you need? Can a person with 4 years, if they're really good, can they meet that requirement? Language in our job descriptions, our job postings. No surprise. And when we talk about the startup community, for example, women tend not to respond positively to things in the job description like crushing it or beer pong, or even titles like Scrum Master, very masculine, has masculine connotations to that language. So we need to look at those barriers as well. So there's all kinds of process and barriers that we have to look at in our hiring and recruiting systems. The second part that really intrigues me is we've been talking about it from the organizational standpoint, finding the right person for our job. But from a societal impact, and for me personally, from a purpose and meaning, let's flip that and think about how do we find the right job for this person. And this goes to community outreach. This goes connecting to our education institutions, to the affinity groups. And we've all experienced this. This is where I think it gets exciting and where our aspirations need to lie, at least in part. Think about a time when you have been totally locked in to your job and you get in this, what sometimes is called a state of flow. Or maybe you've observed teammates, colleagues that have been in this state of flow. Everything becomes effortless. You feel locked in, you feel like you're in the right place at the right time. Your capabilities match what you're being asked to do. And it actually becomes a state of joy. Time goes away. These are the moments where you step away and you're like, wow, 4 hours just passed. It didn't even feel like 4 hours. I was totally in the zone. What if we could do that more often, and if we could do that for more people? And if we think about it that way, then the question becomes, there's this person that has capabilities. What are their capabilities, their values? What energizes them? What kind of jobs would be good for them so they enter this state of flow? And if we think about, when I think about it that way, it's very energizing to me. And I think now we've got really strong societal purpose. So it's one thing to think, I got 10 jobs, I got to fill them as quickly as possible. I got 1,000 candidates. How do I evaluate it? That's all well and good, and that's the core of our of what we're trying to do. But let's also think at the individual level. How can we find the right place for this person? And again, I think assessments are at the heart of that, getting that insight and increasing that self awareness about a person's capabilities.
I think that's a very exciting idea. I mean, I think that's one of the things that can motivate a lot of us doing actual good in society, helping people reach their own self-actualization. I think that's a very, very energizing purpose.
Yeah, and
The other,
I see, Suda. It's interesting. I see, your Impress AI is part of that. It was just a couple of days ago. You sent across a link to say, hey, I want to show you something. I clicked on it. And I started engaging in the user experience that you were showing, and I found myself. I was just going to look at it for like a minute or two, and like 12 minutes passed because it just felt natural. It was super engaging. It was effortless. So I think if we can carry that user experience in the front end when we're reaching out to that hidden worker, to those pockets of talent that we don't normally see, and bring them in, it's a win-win for the individual and the organization.
that's really amazing to hear. Thanks for saying that, Ernie, and thanks for trying that. Really glad to hear that.
It's good stuff.
The other thing that's been coming up, of course, for the past few years is this data science led approach to identifying talent. And there are all of these, data science startups that have been parsing, online data, publicly available data, or other sources, and trying to tell companies that that's the new way of identifying good talent. How does that gel with, or rather, compete with psychometric or organizational psychology based approaches? Do you think there's a union coming up, or do you think these approaches clash with each other?
Yeah, and I think it's providing a necessary and productive dynamic within the field. So while we may be singular in purpose, identifying the right person for the job or identifying the right job for the person, let's say we're all driving towards that. How we do it is always been in a lot of different ways, and I think we need you know all those facets. We need to follow scientific methodology to make sure that we're treating people properly, that we're resulting in quality decisions. We need that, and that tends to be kind of this incrementalism. How can we be a little bit better each and every day, each and every month, each and every year in the assessment field? On the other hand, on the other side, we also need the mavericks, the innovators that drive change and kind of disrupt the science and challenge us. Are we doing the right thing? So I welcome the disruptors that are out there and saying, look, we can do it in a very different way, a way that's never been done. The other dynamic in play, Sue, that I think will be fascinating to watch for is data privacy. We can thank GDPR for kind of setting the tone and the standard, but now we're starting to see in the United States, for example, not at the country level, at the federal level, but each state, Illinois, California, New York, are passing legislation in what can be collected about us, how that data can be used, and a real shift. Who owns that data? In some regions, it's been corporation. Facebook owns that data. Google owns that data. It's quickly shifting now to no, the individual. It's the individual's data. They own it, and they'll be in control of it. So that's a dynamic that's going to be um, interesting to play out. The other is, so I'll give, if I can, just one more example. Let's talk about another good example of pushing the envelope in innovation. Let's talk about digital interview technology, which was great, right? And we were okay. COVID accelerated a lot of practices, HR practices, and trends that were going to happen anyways. But I'm fascinated about the number of conversations I had with, let's use digital interview technology to interview people remotely. No, will never happen. Can't do it. COVID hits, 98% of organizations adopted video interview technology. Seemed to work pretty well. And the platforms out there are amazing in terms of functionality. Here's the enticing thing: we're also collecting all this. Sure, we're collecting this data about how the person responds to the question, and it's being recorded on video. That's great. And then it's just so enticing. Well, what about the nonverbal, the micro expressions? Could we tell something, infer something based on the person's choice of words, their pace of speech, their eye movement, all of these things, hundreds and hundreds of data points? And for our innovators and our kind of disruptors, they said, yes, I think we can. Well, fast start, and it's commercially appealing, right? We want to believe that we could do that. We could get insights based on nonverbal cues of an individual. It kind of makes rational sense. But again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, unintended consequences. The AI modeling maybe wasn't modeled in a way that allowed for diversity. Some of the indicators just aren't relevant to job performance. Some of them are relevant to job performance, but give certain groups an advantage over other groups. There's cultural differences, things like that. So we saw a fast start. We saw a lot of promise in that technology, but then a lot of these disruptors have had to step significantly back and regroup and say, okay, we went out there, we saw the promise, but we also saw the hazards and risks. Now we need to take what we learned and step back, regroup, and then go forward. And the next step, maybe more in an incremental way. And that's just a cycle of disruption. So, I welcome disruption, but I would say that we also have to be cautious of it. And each organization needs to make their own decisions about how much on the front end they want to be on innovation and change.
I think it's been very fascinating to watch some of these changes. They came into the picture, they blew up in a positive way initially, and then I think a lot of people started getting skeptical. It's been very interesting. Maybe final question: since you lead Aon Assessments, practice in North America and Asia, what are the key differences that have surprised you in terms of when it comes to use of assessments in both these geographies?
Yeah, I tell you, most of my career has been based in North America, and then recently I've had the pleasure of operating in the APAC Asia market, and this is actually I call it my Asia week because most of my client and team interactions are with Asia early in the morning, late at night. But I always find it energizing and refreshing. So one is, let's talk about Asia. China is not Australia, is not Southeast Asia, is not India. They're all so massively different. And I love the dynamic there. Let's take India, for example. Talk about grit and just kind of stick to it. And that's just kind of persistence. And it's rough and tumble, I think, with fantastic intentions and very outcome based. I need to find the right person to get the job done. The individual, I need to find a job that will be rewarding to me, and I love that. And the cycle is very fast, so you can, what I love is I can toss out ideas and methods, and we can try it out very quickly in India and in Asia. So that's wonderful. Southeast Asia's got a lot of emerging markets with variances. We're talking about Thailand or Malaysia or Singapore. It's all very different, but exciting. So kind of the emerging field on it. The one thing that I have picked up on is there's a bit of a dynamic that I think we need. We would be maybe better served if we can start realizing that we're experts in what we do. So a little bit from, I would say, a provider side, there's a bit of a dynamic of the organization says, this is what we want you to do. It's akin to like going to the doctor and saying, this is what I want you to do for me, doc, versus I have this symptom. Can you help me diagnose it and cure it and address it? And, we know what we're doing. So I would like to see a little more um, of our kind of saying we're experts. organization, we're going to advise and tell you and give you strong recommendations on how to address your workforce challenges and opportunities in the best way, and have that balanced discussion, and that collaborative advice. The U.S. I think is, comparing it. The U.S. is kind of the, if it's gonna, if you can make it work in the U.S., it's probably going to work in any other region, because we've been doing it a little longer. We've got a very a legal kind of environment where, you know, opportunity to bring a class action. If there's an opportunity, it's going to be taken, and there's going to be some legal challenge to what we're doing, which has resulted in rigorous processes and procedures and methodologies that can stand up to scrutiny. We've got, of course, in each region a lot of differences within regions. You know, kind of stereotypical, but there's truth to it. West Coast, Silicon Valley, disruption, like you were saying, rapid change of ideas. Some of them fail, some of them stick. But we welcome all that. And as you kind of move over to the East, you got more of the, okay, we'll take your ideas and we'll kind of move it forward in an incremental way. So I love that I can be involved in both regions and see that, and use the dynamics of both cultures to, I mean, actually the many cultures, to enhance the science and to enhance what we're focused on, and really to respond to market trends.
I think you're living diversity of markets and cultures firsthand. I think that's very exciting. Just to go back to our earlier topic, we've come back full circle, and I think that's a great point to conclude on. It's been great talking to you, Ernie. Thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. This is wonderful. I always love having these kinds of conversations, and you know, you represent again a good example of, you know, where your region and where you're focused, and you're responding to these market trends. And I have to say that, you know, where you are going with Impress is kind of leading the way. And for us in North America, we look outside our borders and say, "Oh, Impress AI is doing, you know, kind of out front here. Let's talk with them." So that's exciting. We kind of marry the science of what we do with the science and the technology of what you do, and it's just a great partnership.
Fantastic to hear. And likewise for us, of course, Ernie.